Hi, welcome. I'm Brad McCarty. I lead product marketing here for FusionAuth, and I am pretty thrilled today to be joined by Ken Michie, CTO at Fideo Intelligence. We're going to talk about tackling the critical challenge of AI-powered fraud. So Ken leads the technical team at Fideo. They're a platform that processes billions of daily signals across 3 billion identities, kind of the scale that you need to combat automated attacks where fraudsters use AI to mimic user behavior and weaponize breach credentials. So Ken, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And yeah, big thanks to FusionAuth for having me on stage today. You guys are great, have a great product. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot kind of going on in the space around authentication and fraud prevention. That's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. So, having authentication solution is not always exactly what you need to prevent fraud. And so, I wanted to go to the next slide. Yeah. So, authentication is great at confirming that the right credential was being used to allow somebody access to a system or sign up for an account. But obviously, it's not the only way to confirm that the person behind the credential is legitimate. Fraudsters are starting to exploit that gap. Fraud itself has become a lot more fast and scalable, more scalable and harder to spot. Attackers are using automation and data from past breaches to target companies in bulk. They're also using all the new generative tools that sound and appear to be human. This means that social engineering messages are well written, they're personalized, they're believable. Um, you know, it's not as obvious as they used to be to detect them. There used to be the obvious character flaws of, maybe the misplaced comma or grammatical error that we could all detect, but now it's becoming harder and harder to tell. And in these cases, it's not that authentication is being, is the failing point. Like actually, people are able to log in. It's just that these attackers are now learning how to get around the authentication and using other techniques to gain access to someone's account or create a fake sign up. So just to kind of look at a few of these examples, I mean, there's a lot of ways that these attackers work, but here's just maybe five or so that I wanted to focus on. So the first one is called credential stuffing. And you may notice that hundreds of customers are complaining about new profiles appearing in their accounts. People are just signing up or they're logging in and they actually didn't log in. So attackers are actually using basically breached email password pairs, and they're using them to log into other people's accounts. Sometimes they're doing it manually, like there's actually someone behind the scenes, and other times they're just fanning them out to bots. And so in this case, the credentials were correct, but the authentication system still allowed these people who may not even be real people to log in. So that's credential stuffing. As I kind of alluded to above, phishing and social engineering. A user gets an email that looks like it's from their bank. It explains that a charge failed and maybe asks them to re-enter their password and fooled somebody, right? And so in that moment, the attacker is able to collect that password and then use the phone to then get the 2FA code. And they do all this before that actual person realizes. In the same way, fraudsters are also targeting employees. So not just your customers, right? They're targeting people like ourselves. They're impersonating executives, they're cloning voices, they're using realistic chat messages, and all of this is hard to detect without behavioral or network-based signals. The third one is just around SIM swapping, right? Or porting attacks. So if someone uses a phone as part of their identity or their sign-up process, that could be an attack vector. So what it might look like is all of a sudden that person loses loses service on their phone. The attacker basically at that point has convinced that carrier that no, I'm actually Ken Michie. I'm the one who owns this phone. And then they use that to port it to a different carrier and onto a different account. And then once they control the phone, they can recover or they can leverage the reset password capability where then all SMS codes are being sent to them and then they take over the account. So again, the authentication is working. It's just there's another layer missing to detect that real person. The next one is synthetic identities. So synthetic identities are really just a mix of real information with fake information, or even it could be also another person, right? Maybe it's a little bit of me, a little bit of you mixed in with something else, And so that's why they call it a synthetic identity. And so these are actually a really big problem in the financial sector. People that are trying to gain access to money, like get a loan or, open up a bank account and maybe become eligible for a loan. And what they end up doing is they create these accounts and they just sit on them. And over time, they don't do anything suspicious, but they're building that credit and credibility very slowly. And then finally, the bank says, hey, why don't we offer this person a loan? They seem to be a good, loyal customer. They've been with us for a year, maybe 2 years. And that person controlling the account, who actually is not real, or the account's not actually real about a real person, they take the loan and disappear. Right. So again, these are valid ways to sign up for things, but you don't have enough information to maybe prevent that. And then lastly, just on the whole account recovery fraud space where, you need to recover your account, you forgot your password or whatever, attackers exploit the weak links in this recovery process. So kind of similar to the SIM swap, they're contacting support, they're posing as a person, they're requesting to have a reset. And once they do, they can go in, take over your account, maybe drain your bank account, etc. So, the authentication worked, but again, we're not able to detect the fraud. So why isn't authentication enough? And I mean, hopefully some of this is already clear, but it doesn't it doesn't ask if the account has been exposed in a breach. We're not asking if the device is trustworthy. We're not really knowing if the session that they're using or coming in from is from an unusual place. And in fact, even cookies, once you have signed in, even your cookies can be leaked through malware. And I've actually seen this where you're able to capture someone's cookies, ship them over to another browser, install them on the site, and then you log in just as that person on the other account had done. It's kind of scary. So all these blind spots are leading to an increase in account takeovers, and they're really having an impact on our customers. They're creating a lot of operational strain and ultimately costing money. And so really, all these incidents are just trickling down. Teams are spending time investigating, they're refunding, they're communicating the incidents, and they're doing all this stuff as opposed to maybe improving the products or managing growth, right? Your support teams are spending hours trying to maybe reconcile compromised accounts. Compliance teams have to get involved, right? They have their own documentation and incident management. And then all of this then leads to engineering having to slow down as well. So, it's not just there's security issues alone, it's efficiency and customer trust issues as well. And so if you have issues with people getting into your account, that affects your brand. All right. So the industry has historically been fragmented into these kind of different buckets. You've got authentication, you've got identity verification, and kind of relatedly, you've got fraud prevention. So obviously FusionAuth is amazing at the authentication side. And then over here at Fideo, we like to think we're getting pretty good, if not amazing, on the fraud detection side. And so authentication between both of these and verification, getting mixed together allows for a pretty awesome coordinated defense. And really it's because they're complementary. We're both seeing the same amount of information coming in. One dimension is looking at, is this person provisioned? Is this person real in my account? Do I trust what they put in? Great. And the other is looking at, is this information that they provided trustworthy? All right. So looking at the same problem from two different lenses. Let's see. And so, just to mention this too, because I kind of covered a wide gamut of where the fraud can occur. It's not always just in the same spot. So there's a lot of things to look at. So maybe going through the typical customer journey, there's a lot you can learn before the account is even created. You can look at if the email being provided is brand new or the credential has appeared in breach data, or, detecting if some of this might look like an automated account signup flow, right? So there's a lot you can look at just at the beginning before anything has been created. But then you kind of get through a little bit of the first few stages and you start looking at what's going on during that process. So this is where you can start to look for signs of those synthetic identities. You look and you combine that with some document checks, perhaps with device and carrier data. And again, you're looking at some of the repeated patterns that's happening across all those identifiers. And so maybe someone is creating a fake account. They fanned it out across a lot of bots and they're trying to sign up on a lot of different sites. And in our case, we see this with like banks, right? Or loan platforms where the same email, which was just created, is being used to sign up for a bunch of different bank accounts or trying to get access to loans, right? So that's a real problem. And then you kind of get through to the next phase of like logging in and authentication. So, okay, they've created an account, but now let's link the authentication outcome with that device and look at the behavior. If a valid login has happened from a new device behind a proxy, we can flag it for additional or what we call step up verification. So when they log in, you can look at the details and see if they made sense with respect to what was created at the time that they had the account created, right? So maybe more specifically looking at the IP or even the time of day, right? If I'm always in the United States and then all of a sudden I need to log in from a different country in Europe, maybe it's legit, but maybe it's also something that you could flag, right? Especially if it happens really quick in quick succession. We call that impossible time travel. Okay, and so after authentication, you can also look at what's happening and going on within that login session. So always continue to evaluate activity. Look for changes in the account. So maybe someone's trying to add another email. Maybe they're trying to add another phone number. Maybe they're trying to change the name. Like all those things could be totally valid, but they also are things to pay attention to. And again, you want to look at what's being provided in conjunction with everything else that you already know. And then the last little bit I'll touch on is account recovery. So again, using some of these cases where they've stolen the email or they've stolen the phone or they've used those porting event or porting the phone number to a different carrier, right? Those are all things you can also pay attention to. And really you just want to treat all the unusual recovery attempts as sort of higher risk. So yeah, so it just is always ongoing. So just because you let them in the first time doesn't mean they're going to be good forever. All right. So before I finalize here, just wanted to give you a quick example. So, and here's one that's happened in the wild. So we've got information that was breached on a person's identity and it's on the dark web. And, these hackers pay attention and they can buy these data sets for pennies on the dollar. Like it's pretty amazing how cheap a lot of our own information is on the dark web. And that might have our emails, it might have our names and addresses, it might even have our social security numbers. Like there's all kinds of information out there. So just knowing if somebody's identity has been breached, which most of ours has been, but knowing which elements have been breached is actually really important. And so, just paying attention to all of those when people are signing up or changing their account or trying to prevent account takeover is really important. So in closing, fraud prevention complements authentication by providing ongoing context and coverage across all of the customer life cycles. And so 3 main points being, fraud methods are continuing to evolve. It's no longer just a static authentication, and we need to be able to adapt. Authentication is essential, but it's only that like one layer, right? There's multiple layers to this stack. And then last, continuous multi-signal risk detection reduces fraud losses and operational strain. And that's actually why we wanted to create this product of our own called Verify, because it looks at all of those things in conjunction. And so we know a lot about emails. We know a lot about phones, right? We know how long the email's been in use. We know how long the phone's been tied to this person. And so all of those combined can then help drum up a risk score to say, hey, this operation right here, where they're trying to change the email or add this email, is like now pointing to a different identity. Like that's kind of weird. Maybe we should slow the roll and see if that actually is legit, because maybe it's not. So, and that's all I got for you. You can try this out here with 100 free matches and kick the tires yourself.
Awesome, Ken. Thanks so much. A couple questions for you. So some things that kind of rolled in as you were talking. Uh,
Sure.
you were talking about signals. What kind of signals tend to be the most predictive of fraud risk today?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information that gets provided on account signup or as part of, changing an account. But typically it involves more your phone or your email. And even IP address is still relevant. I mean, I know IPs are changing and they're being masked more and more, but when they're not masked and they have a location that you can attribute, or that they're a VPN or a data proxy, like those can all be important signals. And so, yeah, specific maybe to an email, right? Just knowing if it's deliverable. If I send an email to this address, like, is it even valid or is it going to be responded to? Second, on the phone is kind of similar. You get the SMS codes. And then really it's just kind of looking at the whole picture together.
Right. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot in here, because we are kind of in a very similar situation where when you add authentication, the more secure your authentication becomes, the more friction you can introduce for users. So how do you balance adding fraud checks without creating additional friction?
Yeah, it's kind of like finding that magical balance point for sure. And so for us, we found that the more you can kind of piecemeal it or have like an orchestration process where you put in the email, and I think you may call this like a progressive sign up flow or registration
Mm.
flow, so we'll focus on that. Like if you put the email and you can call a system like ours and say, oh, this is a low risk email address, so you move them on to the next one, and then the next stage says, okay, well, give me your name and your phone. And you provide that. And then maybe in that moment, we're like, well, wait a minute. Like this email, this phone, they look legit, but I don't think they belong together. And so then you can offer like a different verification path in that moment. And so really it's just this sense of an orchestration flow where you're kind of being able to customize that journey based on what you see without saying, hey, give me all your information up front, then I'll decide. Or, you know, because maybe the phone is good and you make them do the SMS code and then they come back with the right code and you're like, okay, well, that checked out. That's good. But you didn't abort right away. Right. So it's kind of that
Right.
balance of really an orchestration and kind of step by step approach that we found being most successful.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to having open platforms where you can connect API to API and integrate those calls directly with your existing systems. You talked about the journey. Where in that customer journey do you really see fraud prevention adding the most value?
Yeah. So it does. So yeah. So it applies to all stages, but I feel like if you can head it off at the beginning, that can save you a lot of pain downstream. And so having kind of those pre-checks up front can be really impactful. Ironically, in other cases, though, some people, like some of the customers we've worked with, they're actually less concerned about that upfront pre-screen and more concerned about the back end activity that happens after they have the account.
Right.
So, they may have a bunch of perhaps um, uh, fake accounts in their banking platform, and that's not great. But it's only a problem when those fake accounts start trying to sign up for loans later, right? And so at that point, they can start looking at the activity that's happening after the sign up flow. So it kind of
Mhm.
depends sort of on your industry and what your product is.
So how are fraudsters then using AI and automation to get past kind of traditional defenses? Is it are we looking at kind of new versions of like a DDoS attack where they're just kind of flooding the zone, or what's the answer there?
Yeah. So, and again, it depends on the sign up flow that you may be encountering. But they make it a lot easier to identify maybe a type of synthetic identity to go create, right? So
Mm,
you may not have to be as creative up front to say, oh yeah, I'm going to make it look like this and that. The AI will say, yeah, you should go create a Google phone, sign up for a Google phone over there, and then you can create this email over there. And then you can get instructions too of like where to maybe find some of this information that, you shouldn't be able to find. So there's the generative just kind of coming up with creative ideas there. But then there's also like the tricking us better that's happening, with um mine's blanking, the social engineering attacks, right? Where you're getting the phishing campaigns and they're making it look like, hey, I'm sending this email to you, Brad, but really I didn't send you this email. Like someone crafted it in my tone and made it look just like me. So
right.
that can then have a lot of downstream impacts too, where maybe the person on the other end offers up too much or they do click on that link. So, and that can kick off a whole different type of, security incident. So,
Interesting. It's fascinating stuff, and I love the parallels between what you guys are doing at Fideo and what we do here at FusionAuth. So thanks for your time today, Ken, and for your expertise, kind of bringing this the new world of identity and fraud verification into our world as well. So I appreciate it.
absolutely. No, I appreciate the opportunity. So, thank
Yeah,
you
for
so
sure.
much. And thank you all for attending.
Yep. And thanks for everyone for showing up today. And we will have this available to you for a direct download. And of course, you can find it on the FusionAuth website as well. It is fusionauth.io/webinar to get your hands onto the old stuff. And of course, keep an eye on what's coming up next as well. Thanks so much for attending today. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks all. Bye.